Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Debbie Horovich, and I'm your host today. Welcome to the Silver Lining Storycast. This is the new interview storytelling series that I launched this fall, 2016. And I've launched the Silver Lining Storycast because earlier this year I launched the Silver Lining Story book. And I found through collecting these anthology stories, they're a lot like chicken soup for the soul type of stories. I really wanted more opportunities to speak to people in my local cities and around North America and really interview them, talk about the silver lining stories that exist in their life. Very often what we do in this conversation is, promote some of the worst experiences that we've had in our lives. But what we're doing ultimately is we're exploring and recognizing the truth in the saying that every storm cloud has a silver lining. And so I'm really excited here today. My guest is Jeffery Potvin. He is the CEO of Hardboot Communications, which is a custom software application company that helps businesses across North America build end-to-end digital software solutions, including CRM and other applications. Welcome, Jeffery.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So please introduce yourself to the audience, just as like a warm-up question for the podcast. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what drives you in your business.
For sure. So as mentioned, my name's Jeffery Potvin, and I own a company called Hardboot Communications. The company was started 9 years ago today, which is quite fascinating in itself, but pretty exciting as well. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur of sorts. I worked, spent a lot of time going through school. I taught courses through York, Seneca, Institute for Computer Studies and whatnot while I was in school. And I was a big fan of technology since my earlier years, I guess, in my early 20s. And I kind of went through from there and started building out small networks and some coding and development from that side of it. And as I kind of went through, I decided to keep going back to school, and I never could get out because I think as we talked, I was quite comfortable in the school environment learning and being educated. So it was a fear for me, I guess, to get out. But at one point, I guess I got into a predicament when I was, I think, 26 or 27, and I decided that I needed to get a real job and become a real boy, if that's from a movie script funny. But so I went and took a job at Loblaws and in their IT department. Well, I originally started off in the warehouse because I used to work at Loblaws when I was a kid. So at 14 years old, I actually worked in the grocery store doing a lot of different jobs. I could never do just one, right? So I worked in all areas of Loblaws, became quite efficient. But when I went in, I took a job at the warehouse. I worked there for, I think it was 7-8 months. And I interviewed for a lot of different jobs in head office. So I figured they would hire me directly out of the warehouse first because of all my education, which would get me a job quicker. So I learned the inside of a warehouse and how it operated. And it was a very tough job. Nothing like baling hay when I was a kid, but it was still up there packing skids. But I ended up getting a job working for the head office of Loblaws in IT. Came on as a network admin and developer. And I kind of worked my way through different roles, which kind of changed hands almost every year to the date. I think the same day I changed jobs 3 years straight.
Wow.
So I became the marketing manager for all the online e-commerce platforms. And that's where I was able to take 4 businesses, Flower Markets, gift cards, Photo Lab, and oh my God, basket PC basket business.
Oh, wow.
And I took those businesses from doing $1 million worth of revenue to doing 10 million and integrated them into 90 million worth of business over 3 years. And kind of rebuilt and restructured how they worked in stores. So online distribution all the way to new products. So that was kind of fascinating. And then from there, I got poached by a company called Caboose, helped them rebuild a mom's platform for like Facebook for moms. And then that's where I kind of went out on my own. And Hardboot started 9 years ago from there.
It started 9 years ago. You said, congratulations, by the way. Today is your 9-year anniversary being an entrepreneur, according to LinkedIn.
They reminded me.
So you started Hardboot 9 years ago. What was the impetus, that situation that brought you to going out on your own? I think you said that you weren't trying to start a business on your own.
Well, it's kind of interesting or twofold. When I worked at Loblaws, I was in my at that time it would have been my last year, so it would have been, I think, 2006. I was working on releasing the last builds for the e-commerce sites. I think it was for Photolab at the time, and my boss sat me down. And I was always very autonomous to my jobs. No one ever knew who I worked for. No one really understood what I did there, but they all just knew I generated revenues. So they were always just letting me do what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And my boss sat me down and he said, "Jeffrey, you don't belong here." And I was like, "What? Who tells their employee they don't belong in a business?" And he said, you need to go out on your own and work for yourself and build a company. And I was like, okay. And I just kind of looked at it and I thought, well, it's kind of fascinating. I used to, with my employees, when I used to think they would overgrow me or overgrow the business, I would try and find them jobs in other departments or even outside the company, because I just felt I wasn't able to help them and wanted to. So I would find them other jobs. So I thought maybe he was doing the same thing. So I took that to heart and I thought, okay, this is fascinating. And when Caboose poached me out of the business, that next short little while after that, it started to come to fruition, I guess. I started looking at the job I was in at Caboose, and I thought, well, you know what, maybe this job isn't working out as I expected. And I started to look at other avenues. So I started going in and talking to other businesses and marketing agencies and whatnot. And then the day came where they packaged me out, and I never actually expected that to happen, but they basically walked me in, and I wasn't shocked. I was like, no problem, that sounds good. I cleared my stuff out, and I went home, and I had been working so hard and for so long through Loblaws and Caboose, like 7 years or whatnot straight, that I decided that I needed to do something different and take a trip. So I packed my bags and I solo traveled to China or Asia for 3 months of backpacking. And when I came back, I started to look at all these businesses that I had been originally talking to through Caboose, where I started to see that things weren't working. And I had a bunch of different offers come in for jobs and roles. And at that point, I started to kind of evaluate what was amiss in the market. And I started building presentations around how I could pitch businesses on my technical expertise, because I knew tech well and I knew business well, because I had done both, which is a bit of a hybrid and kind of an anomaly in the market, because most people are either tech people or they're business people. So, and I was very good at being a non-emotional person. So I was always good at calling people out on their shit. So people didn't like that, but I also didn't like doing things twice. So I tended to do that more frequently. But I did learn the politics of it. I will say that I became better at pulling someone aside and saying, hey, try this or do this, so that, they could look good in their meetings. And I hold that true today, that I'm a huge fan of supporting people in that sense and helping them get their wins. So that's where it really started, is that I started getting in front of businesses and pitching them. And the way it kind of transacted was that, or what pushed me to actually work for myself, was that one day I had met with a marketing agency, and they wanted me to come in and do a job, and they offered it as a VP of sales. And I never saw myself as a salesperson at all. Was never a fan of it, which is kind of fascinating because it's all I do. But when I started, I never really liked getting in front of people. I was never comfortable with it. I didn't like presenting in front of people, and all these skills that I was terrible at became probably the piece that drives me the most, which is getting in front of people, talking to people, networking, and being in that limelight, I guess. But it was all from first, it was from a teacher that I was in school with that opened up the door when he was reading a Linux book, and I was writing my midterm, and I couldn't believe my third year lit teacher was reading Linux. So I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I teach Linux." And I was like, "What? You're a lit teacher?" And he's like, "You know this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I work in it every day." So he pulled me outside the classroom after the exam was done, and he offered me a job to teach IT courses. And that kind of opened me up. I spent the next year learning how to teach and talk in front of people. I couldn't sleep the day before for hours. Like, I just couldn't. It wouldn't allow me to, because I was so nervous getting in front of people. That opened me up over the year. I became a lot better at it. And I think the turning point there was I fell asleep on the class. I fell forward and smacked my head on the blackboard because I hadn't slept the night before. So that was the turning point. That's where I realized that I can do this now, and I can fall asleep at night, that I know my stuff. So I literally fell as the class jumped. Like, what happened? It was like I keeled over drunk or something, but I literally fell over from not sleeping. And that was the turning point there. But those skills all kind of started to build up. And when I was on my own that year, a gentleman had pitched me to come in, as I mentioned, as this VP of sales. And he didn't believe I had the skill set, and I declined his job. But he had talked me through lunch, and he said, "Jeffrey, you mitigate risk, and you need my help." And after thinking about it, 3 days later called him up. I thanked him for his time and basically said that I don't mitigate risk at all, but I guess the perception is that maybe I do, and that I'm going to go out on my own to do my own thing. Maybe prove you wrong, but I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of the pushing point to starting my own company. But it wasn't the defining moment. It became the moment that gave me the hunger to drive forward. First was my first boss telling me I needed to be out there. Now it was him telling me that I needed someone's help. And I never looked at myself as ever needing someone's help, because I'd never asked for it. So it kind of got me the wheels turning. And a month later, he came back, couldn't find someone to do the job. So they offered me to do it on contract. And I started to do the job, and I closed 95% of the people that were required in the program that they were doing for Scotiabank. And he came back to me after sitting in on a call and apologized and said that he had learned something, and that I was really good at what he didn't realize I would be. And we continued to talk, and I went. That's where I kind of started to move forward. And one day, not too long after that, I had a presentation to meet in front of the president of Boss, which was a marketing agency, and they asked me to come in and talk to them, and I said, "Well, I got this opportunity. I'm going to be sitting with the president of this big agency. I got to come up with something good." And I looked at the presentation that I had already been pitching to people, and it kind of glared out at me was that I could just go in and tell them I'll take over all of their outsourcing and their technology, and I would build it through all of my businesses and connections, but they wouldn't have anything to worry about. I'll pay for it all until it launches, and I would make their life easier, and they would make money off it. So even though I've been pitching this already for 4 or 5 months, not knowing it, or 6 months, I had the solution in front of me. So I went in and I pitched them that, and they loved the idea, and asked me to come back a few days later and hash out the financials on how it would work. So I did. And then a couple of days had gone by, and I ran into him, and he said, "Jeffrey, aren't you supposed to be sending me some details?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't think you really wanted them." So I'm like, "Yes, I am." So I sent them off to him, and 3 days later, so this was all within in a 2-week span. And then 3 days later, he called me into his office to meet with the rest of their team, or a couple of people in his team, and talk to them. So I did. And we sat in the boardroom, and it was 3 of us, I think. And his name was Claude, really good guy. And he says, with the other 2 guys. And he says, Jeffrey, we've looked everything over. We like it. We want you to start today. And I was like, oh, geez. I had no idea what to do. And he was like, we just arranged a town hall. We're going to walk into the next door and we're going to introduce you to the rest of the company because you're now going to be taking this over. So I was like kind of amazed and I didn't know what to do, but I guess the best deal I've ever done. They walked me into the room and they said, Jeffrey's now taking over all the digital development. And I became the guinea pig of my own business model. And I started working on site. And that was between, I guess, 9 years ago. That's where it all started. And that's where, that's how I got my first kick at being an entrepreneur and started Hardboot on that time period. So
I love that you say you were a guinea pig of your own business model. It's just so, I think it's so well grounded and such the right motivation in this world, because we have so much potential as individuals. And frequently, like you said, you had that job interview where someone sat you down and said you mitigate risk, and he was really kind of undermining your potential, so that you would feel like you should take the job with him.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
and yet, you know that even though this business model doesn't exist, and most people will say if it doesn't exist, it's because somebody tried it and it doesn't work. But if this business model doesn't exist, you know inside of yourself that you can make it happen. And that is really what it comes down to, I think, with any job, with any goal, with any dream, with any achievement that we want.
For sure. And the thing that became, I guess, the next part of it that was fascinating was that for the longest time, for 3, maybe 4 or 5 years into the model, probably 4 years, I couldn't even call myself a CEO. I was scared to say that I was a CEO of my own company, even though I started off for the first 6 months. They pushed me to hire someone eventually because I was just too busy. I tried to do it all. And on the side, they didn't know this, but I was actually at York and I was doing a degree in public policy and management. And I would do courses all day Friday and weekends and weeknights so that I could work Monday to Thursday. So I would actually be in school doing a degree, but they didn't know that. I just told them I couldn't work Fridays. And that was because I was in school all day, but I was doing this as kind of I needed to be busy. So, yeah. But the whole CEO thing, I couldn't admit it. I just didn't want people to know. One, I didn't have people that worked for me, so I couldn't call myself a CEO, or at least I didn't feel it was right. And then when I did have people working for me, I felt wrong because I was like, am I really a CEO? Should I just wait on this? Maybe things will change in a year or two. Maybe it won't be like this, so I'll just wait.
Well, is the CEO something that has to be earned?
Yeah, I would think so. It actually took my team to, I called myself the managing director, and I found that a lot of people started using this name, and I just came and pulled it out of the air. I don't even know where I came up with this name for. But I didn't want to call myself a CEO. So it went on for about 4 years until someone on my team was just like, you need to change your LinkedIn and tell people you own this company because they keep trying to hire you. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. It's interesting how we perceive our permission or our right to wear a title.
Yep.
I mean, I find frequently with the people that I work with, the title book author, published book author, or even best-selling book author is something that people really, really think that they have to struggle for.
True.
And
I think that in
your heart and soul into it.
I started to learn more about the title thing because I think as a kid you're taught that these titles are something that's big or exciting. Mm-hmm. And I think that someone once said to me in a meeting, and this was it was with Fuji, and his name was Bruce, and he had said to me, Jeffrey, we don't all have MBAs like you. And so we can't all have the same way of articulating in a meeting. And I kind of just smiled because what I learned from that comment was, one, I didn't have an MBA. Yes, I have degrees. But it was, if you can't talk smart and be who you are and articulate things, people will be able to see that anyway. So they already know who you are based on how you articulate yourself and how you communicate. And that should be almost enough as a title so that people can balance through that. And, maybe as a kid, I thought I needed to be the CEO. And when I was in the warehouse trying to get a job inside of corporate Loblaws, I was interviewing for these jobs, and I had gone through 5 different job titles or 4 different jobs, and they wouldn't hire me. So finally I asked the HR manager, and her name was Diane. And I said, how come no one will hire me? You have this super educated kid working in a warehouse. Why won't you hire him into the tech jobs? And she's like, Jeffrey, you want me to be honest with you? And I said, yes, please. I need to figure out how to get out of here. And she said, well, every time someone asks you where you want to be in 10 years, you keep telling them you want to be the CEO of the company. And I was like, well, what's wrong with that? I do. I want to be the CEO of blah, blah. It's like 10 years. Isn't that good enough? Like, these guys shouldn't worry about it. And they're like, Jeffrey, you can't tell someone that because they're all offended. They all think you're going to take their job. I'm like, I don't want their job. I don't want to be there. I just want to be able to get to this job.
Yeah.
Like, you need to come in with something less. Just say you want to be the best at your job. I'm like, yeah, but I already will do that.
Yeah,
so,
like that'll be like in a year from now, not 10 years from now.
Exactly. So it was never understood. But what I got from all of that was that titles never really meant anything to me after I started to kind of take that perception. And even in my own company, people are we find a title that matches them. And it's just because of context of where you're at and where you feel you're at, which drives you forward because of your experience and your knowledge. And that's kind of where I balanced out a lot of those things. And maybe that's why I was always fearful of being a CEO in my own company. But it was a great learning to kind of move you forward in the realm of corporate world. So
very interesting. When we were talking before we started the recording, we went through a little quick chat, and you told me a little story. There was a time a couple of years ago, I think, where a lot of stuff was happening, and I think it's brought about some really good results for you. But at the time, everything that was happening was kind of crappy.
For sure.
Want to tell us about it?
You bet. I think I think we all probably go through this in life, and it really is, learning the energy and learning how to balance a lot of things. But it's always in hindsight, I think, is where a lot of the learning comes from, because if you knew it was happening at the time, I think maybe you'd screw it up, because you would be like, wait, I know what's happening here. I shouldn't be doing it this way. So I think a lot of that probably falls into the context, but it was probably 3.5 years ago. We had just a lot of things that were happening at one time in the business where we were fighting different battles, from clients not paying to lawsuit that was happening. Just a lot of negative things that all kind of started to fall and impact at one point in time. And when you think back of all of them, they probably didn't seem as, at the time they seemed very impactful, but now you think they were a lot smaller. But it was everything from the suing part, large amount of non-payable clients, which I think equated to some, $500,000. It was killing the payroll. It was affecting a lot of client work. My FaceTime with people was even worse, because I was, you start to take the beat up, and you start thinking that you don't belong and you shouldn't be doing this business. And at the same time, and I remember sitting with my really good friend, Andrea, and she was like, this is going to cost us this much. And she was just sharing all of this stuff. And it was just like that aha moment where, oh my God, we're screwed. And it was all really around the same month, which was even more fascinating that it all happened at once. But so all these things came out. Then there was her sharing the dollar thing, and I was driving home, and after that meeting, and then the girlfriend I've been dating a long time at the time, we had broken up, like literally on the phone. I was like, oh my God. And then my condo, I had rented it out because I was planning on buying a new property, which now obviously I couldn't. And I was stranded. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I literally started having all of these, what's my next move? What do I have to do? And I ended up joking around that I was going to move home with my parents because I really was down to the last straw of what am I going to end up doing here. And it all ended up working out that I had to move home. And my niece is actually at probably 4 years old or 5 years old. She told Nana, "Is Uncle Jeffrey moving home?" And my mom's like, "What? I don't think
no.
so." And it ended up being the truth. I ended up having to move home. And I haven't lived at home since I was like 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
I left home at an early age to play hockey. So I had been on my own ever since. And yeah, so I ended up moving home and kind of went through a lot of lessons of life fitting in with two older people that I, as a kid and as an adult, never really understood. This sounds terrible, but really it's not, is that I never really understood parents because I never really had that connection to them. And I started to kind of try to learn more about the process and fix my company and everything else. And it took a long time. My parents didn't understand what I did as a business. And I know the condo now is rented and all of these things were kind of cascading. And I started to try to fix things and put everything together. And probably about, I think it was month 4 or 5, I had just got to the point where I was ready to fold the company and walk away. Just take the losses and everything else that had occurred from everything that was at that point in time. And I was driving home from a meeting, and it was with a new person who I'm now friends with, which is pretty cool, with the town of Ajax. Mm-hmm. And I was in a car accident. A car was squeezing through a couple minutes away from my house and was squeezing through the road. And I couldn't see the car come across me because of the traffic was so busy going east where I was going west. And the car jetted in front of me. I T-boned them. It was a young guy. And I ended up, car was written off, but airbags deployed and I had whiplash and a concussion. Mm-hmm. And the car spun out, hit another car and all this stuff. So at that point in time, I got out and called my parents, and my dad actually thought I did it. Got all mad at me. What the hell? And I was like, no, man, like, relax. I didn't do this. I'm just part of it. So anyways, we came and took care of everything. And then from that moment on, it was, and as I was telling you about it, was this life-changing moment where I had been to a point where I was just tired of everything and exhausted from thinking that people were bad and the world was terrible. And this car accident kind of jogged my brain or whatnot. And from that moment, I had this leap of faith in the world of energy change, and the whole world started to kind of feed back. And within I think a week, we had 12 new client pitches and all this work flying in. And I was supposed to be sleeping and taking care of my injury. And I had more energy than I've ever had and was driven to solve this, bring all these new clients on. And that's kind of where it started to make the change, and the business started to move forward, and we started to all get reinvigorated, and energy started to increase, and all these great things happened. Now, not everything that came in from at that moment was great things.
Of course,
you still won some things that ended up becoming bad for business, not knowing it at the time, but it just the fact that they were there to help pick you up, even though you can call it. They were part of that bad mix, but you accepted it and still drove forward, not realizing it until after. Then, so then we kind of learned through all these things, and then that was kind of the turning point that said, you needed to be in this business and you needed to keep doing these great things that you are. So.
Yeah, you can't really shut down a business when you've got 12 new clients in 2 weeks.
No, you can't. That kind of gives keep driving forward, kid, and you can figure this out.
You can't go back to those clients and say, okay, here's your deposits back. Thanks for the contract, but no thanks.
No, exactly. I'm done and I'm out of here. So it was good. It's
really the way that you told that story, it's so very clear. I recently, or a year ago, I heard from Dory Clark, the author of a book called Stand Out. how to build your breakthrough idea and build a following around it. I saw her speak in Toronto, and she had actually interviewed me for the book, so I knew about it about a year and a half before it actually came out. But when she was saying that of everyone that she interviewed about their breakthrough ideas and when that breakthrough really happened for them in life was at a time when everything had changed for them, and it had dramatically disrupted their expectations and their values in life. And it sounds like, your change of your living environment, you put your condo up for sale, but then had to move out and not move into a bigger, better condo. You had to move into your parents' house instead.
Yep.
And you were being sued and having all of these non-paying clients, and having a really hard time in business. Your girlfriend broke up with you.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm not laughing about that specifically.
No, just waterfall
like everything's piling on.
Yeah.
And you're thinking like, this is it. I'm just going to give it all up. And that's exactly what Dory said, was that when everything is removed from around you, then you've got the freedom in your mindset to really see what is most important to you and where the real opportunity is. And so I think that car accident pretty much, like I really do think it jolted you. It gave you a jolt or a jog to your brain and your thinking and your perception of things.
No, and I can agree 100% that, that moment really did define and change where I was going. Because I think at that point I was ready to just throw in the towel and start over. And I don't even know what the start over would have been.
No.
But I think that what I lacked at the time, if you were to call it the start over, was that I didn't have the energy at that point to really find a way to start over. And if I look back at my entire life as a kid and all these things and the stories, and we were joking about a lot of these when I was younger, joking about these the other day about even stories from when I was a kid of how I was. And it just, those probably would never have come out. So one, I think you have unfinished business that you had to take care of. So because maybe I was not close to my family, my parents, even though they're my family, I think me having to go home had to correct that. Mm-hmm. So now I have like two best friends that I live with.
Oh,
and, yeah, they're awesome.
That's so nice. You're living with your parents still now?
I have no reason to leave. They're awesome. So like, it's probably, it sounds terrible, but it's probably the best thing I've ever done. It
sounds terrible in the way that it's not something that anyone would want to go through.
For sure. And or people at my age would say, I got to move home with my parents, but it's not because now I'm in a financial situation or having issues that I need to live with my parents. It's actually because I enjoy it, and as a comfort level, it's helped define me as a person in the last 3.5 years as well. And I think, like we were talking about earlier, that if there was that next kind of turning event, mm-hmm. It was probably a year ago, or coming up to a year ago. And that was, or I guess it would have been a year ago. As I was traveling through Asia and coming back, I started to kind of feel this, what now? What am I supposed to do? And I didn't have that thing to reinvigorate myself. So I started to go back to almost like pre-car accident, where mm-hmm. I had to find something that was defining and changing me, because one, I've never been attached to something this long, and it had been 9 years doing the same job. I don't know. It's like, if you've ever had to do something for 9 straight years, you'd be like, man, something's got to give here. Where's the drive? Where's the excitement?
Yeah, you've got to have a purpose. You've got to have an end goal in mind. Like, you've got to be trying to get somewhere and change some things, and just doing the same thing every day. Sounds like for you, that's a recipe for
pretty much disaster.
Not enjoyment.
Yeah, exactly. Not happy. And so I started to spend the last, since January onward, and it was almost because I fell into it, and it could have been hardship and whatever else that started to kind of bring me down. But at the same as it was bringing me down, it was also bringing me back up. And I started to reflect on me and tried to figure out who I was and what actually drove me, because I had gotten this far, and I was like, what was that next I guess as you would call it, what's that next silver lining? Not knowing that I would call it a silver lining, but what made Jeffrey tick? What made him excited? And I started to think back to ask questions about my childhood, like what was I like as a kid, and what did I do when I was in high school, and how did I do this? And I started to put all these stories together. And I remember talking to my dad about it, and I was like, every night I'd come home with some random analogy because I have to analyze the hell out of everything. It just happens to be how I am. And my dad would be like, it's onward and upwards, just move forward, forget about the past. And I was like, yeah, but if I don't understand my past, how am I going to be able to solve problems going forward? And I started to really dive into this and pay a lot of attention to it. And I started to find out a lot of things about me that maybe people, and when I tell friends, they're like, yeah, I could have told you that. And I'm like, but you didn't. And I'm like, they would have been helpful. It would have solved all these other issues, I'm sure. But it was more of interesting things on the sense of learning that I'm a non-emotional person, that they used to call me data as a kid, and now it makes sense why they did. And or being introverted, where I spent a lot of time. I built my companies by myself. I travel by myself. We were laughing about stories when I was a kid, but I was like 2 years old, and some old lady found me trying to cross the main highway in my hometown on my big wheel. Who 2 years old is out gallivanting on his own, taking off for hours. At 3.5, 4 years old, my brother and I were out in probably a kilometer away, and he was 3, and I was found a gas tank and was spraying him down with gas oil, because I didn't know what I was doing. But hey, I'm 4.5 years old, and I'm out
that looks like
walking
fun
around town, right? And and then at 5 and 6 years old, I was up at 6 a.m. fishing, like down at the harbor by myself fishing. So I don't think my parents could really do much to hold me back, but I was always an explorer. I was always doing things, and I started to learn that maybe as being introvert, as being all of these different skills, you start to kind of figure out who you were and how you work. And then I started to evaluate maybe my teams and friends, and I started to realize that I'm attracted to people that are similar to me, and they're all I'm like, oh my God, we're screwed. We're all introverts. This isn't going to work. But it actually has worked out awesome. And I think those types of learnings have also allowed me to be more happy, because it's solved, the world's food crisis problem. Because once you've realized enough about yourself, and all the things that you did, like I love helping people. I have a lot of random friends in my life, but it was because I was learning from them all. I was able to share and help, and I started to realize, why did I work for all my life? I've always worked at some instance in non-for-profit, like reading groups for kids or whatnot. So when I hadn't done it in so long, I started to thirst for what made me so driven as a younger person. And I started to go back to those things. And what I found was that I love teaching. I love being able to share knowledge. So I started teaching at Seneca on Thursdays. I mentor in the Helix program for the School for Startups. I also mentor for a company called Stepstones, which is for children that are part of the ward, like part of, I guess that's classified as the government, but they don't have family. So I took training courses and everything so that I could help other youth that are younger and, have a lot of potential, but I wanted to be able to give back in that sense. And I teach soccer on the weekend on Sundays to U16, under 16 kids. And I started to find that I was getting so much energy giving back to things that I enjoyed doing as a kid, because I used to coach teams and I worked at hockey camps. And I thought, well, if I can do the things that I really enjoyed then that made me happy, that'll help my overall business and my overall well-being. And it has. It's changed the dynamic of how I feel part of my business. So now my business has been growing, and the people and everybody's having fun, and I'm the farthest thing from any sort of micromanager, but I give everybody the autonomy so that they can grow. And I started to branch off and started doing other things that allowed me to give back, which is things like OPN.Ninja, which are Open People Network, where we panel and interview like-minded entrepreneurs and C-level execs, where we can get stories from them on how they became successful or what they did to overcome diversity and grow. And tonight we start on the inaugural 9th year, which is funny now that I think about it too. Pitch It, which is for startups to go out and pitch their business to a room full of hopefully 50 to 100 people that want to hear about these great startups, and they'll do that once a month, and we'll put together a panel of judges that will help them so they can become successful. And so these are some of the things that I've been working on to give back, and I'm working on a new startup myself. So I kind of found all these happy things, and it's been a great journey since the car accident in the last 3.5 years for sure.
It's good to be able to see that, like, I know, and car accidents are painful and they're terrible and they're costly, and it takes a long time physically to recover and emotionally, but ultimately in the end, the challenges that you've gone through, you can see how it's allowed you to see where your strengths lie and allowed you to embrace who you actually are as a person.
For sure. And what things you're good at. And not just the accident. I think it's just self-reflection. It's when it's taking the time to pay attention to the problem and figure out what the solution or outcome is going to be. And in doing that, you found out a bit about yourself, but then you also were able to find out what made you happy and what made you tick more. And that catastrophic event, if you want to call it that, is the impetus to what drove you forward as a more observant person, and figured out where you needed to fit next. And there'll probably be 10, 20, 30, 40 more catastrophic events that are going to happen in life for me and for everybody. But it's the taking the time and opportunity to pay attention to what it did and where you netted out. Even if I didn't do it at the time, I have done it now. And I think that's probably been a good learning for me to figure out those things that will help you grow in the future, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for the listening audience, really taking the time to reflect on things. It's a practice that I've discovered. I mean, certainly through the last year since I discovered my silver lining stories, and have started seeing them everywhere and started interviewing other people on their stories. What's come about for me is, I went through lots of therapy after my car accident and trying to figure out what makes me happy and who am I really. And it really, a lot of it comes down to the ability when you're in the situation to see that your life is bigger than just that one incident, or that the impact of that situation will be smaller on your life than you think it might be at the moment. And also, what I discovered for myself is that those situations, when they come up, when you can recognize, okay, this is the universe putting a roadblock in my way, and it's not a permanent roadblock, it's just a test. It's the universe saying, how badly do you want your end result? And so when I can see these things coming to me, or these people who are problems or challenges that are coming up in my projects, I can look at it and go, okay, how badly do I want the end result? And I just have to stay focused on that and then take the next right steps towards the end result. So that is one of the best skills that have come around for me through telling these silver lining stories, is that I can also, now I can see the silver lining happening. I can see that the silver lining will come, because I know every storm cloud has a silver lining. So even when I'm in the middle of crap, even if it allows me to sometimes behave better because I'm like, oh, wait, I'm going to want to tell this story. Yep. I'm going to want to tell the silver lining about this story at one point, and I don't want to have to say I behaved really badly.
No, and that's key to it all. I think that because you're learning all of these different angles of it, you now have a fourth vision. Like, you can see it coming before it happens, and that's either good or bad. Probably good in the sense that it helps other people, because you're now able to share that.
I think it's great.
That is amazing, right? But on your own side, you might be like, hold on, people, put the brakes on. This is going to be a silver lining moment. I can sense it right now. And this is what's going to happen. People are like, you're ruining it. It's supposed to be silver lining. You might have too much of that fourth vision or sixth vision, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's amazing, because I think the people you can help with it would be you.
Well, I have to do me. I've got to be me. That's what I'm discovering through this. It's so funny, because you said people would call you refer to you in different ways. And people always called me a contrarian. And I always felt that was a negative thing to say. And I always took it as a negative thing. And I was like, but I'm not a contrarian, and I'm not just out to fight.
Yep.
But now I recognize that it's not so much that I'm a contrarian. I definitely am. But I'm seeing things that I know very few other people see.
Yep. And
now I know that can contribute to the conversation dramatically. It can change things dramatically in how people view me when I voice those things that nobody else is talking about. Here's what we need to talk about. Here's what drives me crazy in this situation. When you bring those things up, those are the elements to fix. So, really great conversation. I know we went a little bit longer than we had planned to, but thank you so much for your time this morning, Jeffrey. Thank you, everyone in the listening audience. If you want to reach out to Jeffrey, he's got a lot of stuff going on, like this OPN, Open People Network. Pitch It is starting tonight in Toronto. Tonight would be October 27th. You'll probably be listening to this later. But you can reach out to Jeffrey. Jeffrey, do you want to tell people where they can find you online, or the best place to reach out to you and give you a digital high five for this interview?
Oh, you bet. I can be reached at Jeffery, which is Jefffery, at Hardboot Inc, which is HARDBOOTINC.com. You can even send me a text, I guess, or maybe I don't want to do that. I'll get 8 million. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a text guy, but I think the email is probably the best. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, which is
perfect.
Jeffery.Potvin, which is a great spot to connect with me and just say where you met me or where we've met or listened to. And we'll certainly jump on and help out where I can. So
thank
love to help.
So much for your time. I really appreciate the insights and the conversation. And I hope that we'll be able to do it again.
Oh, I hope so. I think I appreciate it, Debbie. You're doing an awesome thing here, and I'm glad that we're able to be part of it. And I shouldn't talk in third person. I'm glad I'm able to be part of it, and I think you're doing an awesome job. So this is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.